This video is not sponsored by an audiobook monopoly. Hello, this is Top Rank Audiobooks Plus. Because this topic is so similar to my channel, I decided to make a video about the history of audiobooks. Audiobooks aren't really that fascinating. I feel like you only use them to relax, like when you're on a plane or somewhere peaceful. Instead of reading actual books, you can listen to someone read them for you. However, these audiobooks can be super long, and you will see the progression of recording sounds. I really don't think this is that interesting. Like, what kind of person would be interested in this topic? So, let's begin. An audiobook is a recording of a narrated story that can be sold and listened to. You could say that the first technical audiobook, as in recording words, was made by the legend Thomas Edison. He also partnered with John Creasy, and don't forget him. He created the phonograph in 1877 and had a patent in 1878. It could record and reproduce sounds by using cylinders and could capture records for a few minutes. If you want to get technical, in 1857, a French guy with a fancy name, Edouard Léon Scott de Martinville, created the phonograph. It was an instrument used in sound acoustic study. Technically, you couldn't play it at that time, and it could only see the sound waves. In 2008, they managed to scan them into a computer and turn them into audio files so you could hear them. Yes, this was a real thing, an instrument that records sound but couldn't play out the sound. Here's a person singing using the phonograph. Take a listen. Back to the phonograph. You could actually play back sound. There is a stylus that traces the groove where it vibrates and plays back. Next up, Alexander Graham Bell, the guy who created the telephone, made a few modifications to make this phonograph better, like using a wax coated cylinder. Then he called this the graphophone. These changes helped it to get onto the market. It was a hot item and only wealthy people could listen to sound. Basically, you could just hear short clips of jokes, poetry, a lot of music, and artistic whistling. I didn't know that was a thing, but at least it's not artistic kazooing. Because of the recent Civil War that ended before the invention, military marching band music was popular, so that music was played and transferred into these record instruments. In 1887, Emily Berliner created the Berliner gramophone. This is the invention that led to the growing popularity of gramophones, but he never got the fame he deserved because he was cheated out of it. I'm sure he is the forgotten man of audio recording. He patented his invention, as I said, in 1887. He made a horn that connected to the sound so it amplified the audio, and instead of cylinders, he changed it into a disc, sort of like a CD. He varied the materials from hard rubber, celluloid, or zinc. He played and created one of the oldest disc recordings. It's preserved in the BBC library that played Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Berliner tried to start his business, the American Gramophone Company, in NYC, but that fell apart before he even began selling inventions. He decided just to open an office and claims it as the National Gramophone Company. Meanwhile, Elvis Johnson made a great step by adding a spring motor, so you don't have to waste any of your physical energy rotating with your hand. Like, it takes a lot of energy. In 1897, Berliner struck some more bad luck. His factory of gramophones was burned down, and a lot of his wealth was burned down with it. He bounced back and moved his bundles of gramophones to Philadelphia. His gramophones had plenty of pros, but his speeds ranged from 60 to 75 RPM, or rotations per minute, and could play for 2 minutes. So many businesses were competing against each other's Grammys. Some could play at 120 RPM or even 160 RPM, but that meant they couldn't play as long. Edison's instrument was better quality, and he was still using cylinders. Berliner and Edison became competitive to be the leading gramophone producer. Berliner's inventions were discs, and he had poor quality. However, it was much easier to manufacture than to make bulky 3D shapes Edison was still clinging onto. Berliner still didn't have luck in making that moolah. In 1898, he had to stop two firms selling his inventions. In 1899, the sleazeball Frank Seaman created the zonophone, which looked exactly the same as a gramophone. he sues Seaman for patent infringement, and the duplicator, Frank Seaman, countersues Berliner, and the court puts penalties and monetary sanctions on Berliner's company, which is money if you didn't know. Berliner never saw success under his own hands and decided to let the guy who created the spring motor for his invention, Ulrich Johnson, take over. He named it the Victor Talking Machine Company, and that company blew up in the market by 1905. The records were much better and reached 7 minutes long. Edison, who was still playing with ancient cylinder technology, decided to change to disc because of the popularity. By 1913, all audio recordings were pretty much discs. By the 20s, there were radio developments in electronics that boosted how audio is created. People used microphones rather than horns to record sound. You still remember the Victor Talking Machine Company that succeeded from Berliner's company? And that was still one of the leaders in audio recordings, and they wanted to license the new electrical recordings. However, the Columbia Phonograph Company had the same idea. They actually reached a compromise. They decided not to release this process until a later time. Now, audio recording wasn't that sci-fi. It was pretty much common in your everyday life. Musicians, sports commentators, and now television broadcasters used them. The quality was still static and mumbly, but it was okay for now.
We are not going to stop broadcasting. Broadcasting has come to stay.
Now that recording audio was basic, it was time to turn them into audiobooks. In 1930, these discs could play for 20 minutes using closed groove records. A year later, the American Foundation for the Blind and the Library of Congress Books for the Adult Blind collabed to make books for veterans that could not see or people with visual disabilities. In 1932, they made a short test recording of Helen Keller's Midstream book and The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Pretty basic. They got Congress to approve talking books, and they could distribute it to the world. This way, they don't have to be copyright claimed. They merged and called this company the Talking Books Program, which was a strange name. The books aren't talking to you, it's some other person. They started the first recordings of the Bible, patriotic and American documents like the Declaration of Independence, and a bunch of other fiction writers that you never heard of before, and I'll show their images right here. This audiobooks company was created in America and used for veterans of World War I. UK also started these types of audiobooks programs in their country. Then World War II occurred, and after that there was another set of veterans. Ann T. MacDonald formed the Reading for the Blind and Dyslexic, or RFBD. This was to solve the visually impaired veterans after that World War II. Soon, GI Bill in 1944 was to help soldiers' benefits after the war was over, passed by the president that had 4 terms. This helped them to have a college education, but because many of the soldiers could not see, RFBD saved the day. Then they added a bunch of more buildings in the United States. Cademan Records and Listening Library were one of the first ones to jump onto the audiobooks business. Cademan Records was more recognized because they made their business in 1952, 3 years before Listening Library. Listening Libraries then started handing out LP records, which were even better and affordable records to schools and libraries. Remember those vinyl records? Soon, this thing will become old technology. Now we're entering the 1970s. A couple years back, the Library of Congress created cassette tapes, and they started distributing them in 1969. Instead of lugging a huge machine, the new Walkman was used anywhere at any time. Some Japanese created a cassette tape holder into cars, and those streamed into the market. Now you can listen for 60 minutes. There were 8 companies selling cassettes. People still audiobooks for the blind. Voice-over books changed that and hired professional speakers to read abridged audiobooks, which meant they weren't complete. Books on tape created a rental service to listen to a huge variety of audiobooks. In 1978, Henry Tremont decided to follow books on tape and create programs for even better quality audiobooks. He hired extremely professional audiobook readers and started a production team that made audiobooks every day. And that company was Recorded Books. They're the same company that terminated my channel. Joke is over. In 1984, there were 11 competing audiobooks companies looking for it to be a monopoly. Walden Books thought they were cool selling them into libraries before everyone else, but Wikipedia quotes they had negligible sales figures, which meant your sales are really, really unimportant and not meaningful. Also, the same year, Brilliance Audiobooks managed to fit 2 channels on each stereo track. and now allowing twice the amount of recording for each single cassette. I see 21 companies in the audiobook business, but which one will become a leader? I know a lot of years are super important, but when 1986 rolled around, this audiobook business was about to get hot. The Audiobook Publishers Association started giving stats that people don't care about audiobooks. A bunch of the companies started handing out memberships to listen to audiobooks. In 1987, the audiobooks business reached $200 million, which could be used to buy 50 million Big Macs in 2019. In 1988, there were 40 individual companies. Also, cassette tapes are old stuff. Let's come up with a smaller disc and an even more portable machine. The CD was invented in 1982. If you still have a cassette tape in your house and you're a Generation Z, you're a legend. Portable CD players were invented, and in the 90s, the CD-ROM business saw its popularity. The audiobook industry reached $1.5 billion in 1995. A year later, they came up with the Audies, which is like an Oscar award show for audiobooks. People took out cassette tapes in cars and replaced them with CD players. Hey, you still remember the CD? Well, that's old stuff. People still use CDs today, but it's almost unheard of. So throughout the last decade, computing and the internet was starting to form. The internet was taking over the audiobook business. Compressed audio formats were formed into computers. In 1997, this well-known company called Audible created a massive digital media player business. It's not physical, it's digital. Audible created their website in 1998. Liberty Vox created their own audiobook company in 2005. They hired a bunch of volunteers to read books for the public domain. They were creating 1,000 works every year. This digital stuff is really new, and in 2002, cassette tapes finally reached their peak in audiobook sales. In 2008, CDs reached their peak and started falling. CDs were still more than 50% of the audiobook business for a couple of years, trying to stay above the waterline, but they eventually fell in sales. The digital audiobook took over cars, smartphones, and other electronics. As you know, podcasts became popular, and now audiobooks are recorded there. In 2014, the first campus for audiobooks, art, and technology was opened. In 2018, about 137 audiobooks were being created every single day in the US alone. The audiobooks industry is still growing about 20% every single year. In 2015, the amount of ebooks and physical books getting sold went down from the previous year, which just tells us people really do hate reading. But listening to audiobooks is still really popular. The audiobooks history and the art of recording sound has come a really long way. Maybe one day we can just keep a storage of audiobooks in our heads. Better things will just keep replacing older and less convenient technology. From Edison creating the phonograph, Berliner's failures, and McDonald's program, and the evil empire, but the art of someone reading a book to you will always be a giant leap in our humans' history.